In a small village, there was a beautiful girl named Feyi. She was the only child of her parents, and everyone said she was as gentle as the morning breeze. Feyi was not only kind, but also very smart. She loved going to school, and every year she came home with a big prize because she was the best student. The whole village was proud of her, and her parents smiled wide when they saw her with her prizes. But Feyi's life took a drastic turn when she became an adult. A set of corpers, Wale, Kunle, Dayo, and Femi, came into the village for their service. What started as a mere friendship between them and Feyi ended on the bed as they forcefully took advantage of her, all of them at once. But they didn't realize Feyi was no ordinary girl. And what happened next? No one saw it coming. You see, Feyi had a big dream. She would always say, "Mama, Papa, I want to be a banker when I grow up. I want to go to the city and wear fine clothes and work in a tall building with many people." Her parents would nod and say, "Yes, my child, you will be great one day. Keep studying and all your dreams will come true." Feyi's life was bright and full of hope. She believed that nothing could stop her from becoming the banker she always wanted to be. But what no one knew was that her bright and happy life was about to change, and nothing would be the same again. One sunny day, while Feyi sat outside dreaming about her future in the big city, something terrible happened. Her parents went to the next village for a short visit, but on their way back, there was a terrible accident. Feyi's parents didn't make it. Just like that, her whole world came crashing down. When the news reached the village, everyone was shocked. The people gathered, and the village held a proper burial for Feyi's parents. There was singing, there were prayers, and everyone came to support her. But none of it could heal Feyi's broken heart. She cried every day, and the pain was so deep that she couldn't even think of school anymore. Before, Feyi was always the brightest in her class. Now, she could barely pay attention. Her mind was full of sadness. Sometimes, she just sat there, staring at her books, but seeing nothing. The teachers saw her pain and didn't scold her. They knew what had happened and didn't want to make things harder for her. But Feyi didn't know how to go on. Her dreams of becoming a banker seemed to vanish. Life felt empty, and her heart was filled with sorrow. What Feyi didn't realize was that her struggles were just beginning, because soon she'll get herself in the adult life she didn't plan. Feyi managed to move on to secondary school, but things weren't the same anymore. Her grades were no longer good. The girl who used to be the best in class was now struggling. Feyi didn't want to go to school at all, but in her village, every child had to go to school. If she stopped, it would bring shame to her family, even though they were no longer there to guide her. Every day, Feyi felt sad. She sat in class but barely paid attention. Her books looked blurry through her teary eyes. Sometimes, she would sit quietly in a corner, crying all alone. She missed her parents so much, and the dreams of becoming a banker seemed far away, like a balloon floating out of reach. She thought, "How can I go to the city and become a banker without my parents? What's the point of studying when I have no one to be proud of me anymore?" These thoughts filled her head, and it made her feel like her life had no meaning. But no matter how sad she was, Feyi had no choice. She had to keep going to school, even when it felt hard, even when it felt pointless. Little did she know, her life was about to take another unexpected turn with the coming of the new corpers into the village. One bright morning, Feyi walked into school and noticed something different. The classroom was decorated with colorful paper and ribbons. Her classmates were buzzing with excitement, whispering and laughing. Everyone seemed happier than usual. Feyi sat quietly at her desk, confused. She didn't understand what was happening. Suddenly, one of her friends whispered, "Didn't you hear? The old teachers are leaving, and new teachers, youth corps members, are coming to teach us." The whole class was excited because the corps members were young and lively, not like the old, strict teachers they had before. The students couldn't wait to meet them. When the corps members arrived, they were full of energy, smiling and asking lots of questions. They made learning fun, and the other students were eager to answer their questions. Everyone wanted to be noticed by the new teachers, raising their hands high and shouting out answers. But Feyi didn't join in the excitement. She stayed quiet, lost in her own thoughts. Her mind was still heavy with sadness, and no matter how cheerful the new corps members were, it didn't change how she felt inside. While her classmates laughed and enjoyed the new teachers, Feyi just stared at her books, distant from it all. Yet, something was about to happen that would draw the attention of one of the corps members to Feyi. Something that would change everything for her. Corporal Wale was one of the new teachers, and he was assigned to Feyi's class. He was young, full of energy, and always smiling. Every day, he taught the students with excitement, making them eager to learn. But soon, he noticed something different about Feyi. She was always quiet, never raising her hand, never answering questions. While other students were full of life, Feyi sat in silence, staring at her books with empty eyes. One day, Corporal Wale decided to call on Feyi. He asked her a simple question during class, but Feyi couldn't answer. Her mind went blank, and she just sat there, frozen. The class erupted in laughter. One of the students shouted, "She's the dullest in the class!" The laughter grew louder, and Feyi's face turned red with embarrassment. Tears welled up in her eyes, and before she could stop them, she burst into tears. Corporal Wale immediately felt bad for her. He quieted the class and let Feyi be. After the lesson ended, he asked Feyi to stay behind. With kind eyes, he gently asked her, "Why are you so sad, Feyi? Why don't you speak in class?" Feyi hesitated at first, but then slowly began to tell her story. She told Corporal Wale about the accident, about losing her parents, and how her dreams had crumbled since that day. Her voice cracked with emotion as she spoke, and tears fell from her eyes. Corporal Wale was moved by her story. He looked at her and said softly, "Feyi, I'm so sorry for what you've been through, but you are still the brilliant girl you used to be. I will help you get your confidence back. You will smile again, and you will be the best in class once more." Feyi wiped her tears as Corporal Wale promised to help her. But little did Feyi know that his kindness would lead her down a path she never expected, and soon she'll find herself in bed with the Corpers. After that day, Feyi began visiting Corporal Wale's house for extra lessons. He would sit with her and go over everything she had missed in class. Slowly but surely, Feyi started to improve. She could answer questions again, and the quiet sadness that once surrounded her began to fade. Wale was patient and kind, always telling her, "You can do it, Feyi. You're smart. Just keep trying." As Feyi grew more confident, she began sharing her dreams with him. One evening, while they were studying, she looked up and said, "Corporal Wale, I want to go to the city. I still want to be a banker, even though things have been hard." Wale smiled and nodded. "You will, Feyi. You're strong, and if you keep working hard, you'll achieve your dream. Just stay focused on your studies for now." Wale didn't just help her with school, he also supported her in other ways. Sometimes he would buy food for her, knowing she was struggling. He even gave her small amounts of money to help with her needs. Feyi felt safe with him, and slowly her life started to get better. She began to smile again. Little by little, Feyi started to feel hopeful again. Maybe her dreams weren't gone after all. While Copper Vale was busy helping Feyi get back on track with her studies, the other male coppers had begun to notice something else about her. They saw her beauty and how often she visited Copper Vale's house. They started talking among themselves, whispering about how pretty and well-mannered she was. One evening, while they were gathered together, a few of the male coppers started to make wicked plans. "Feyi is such a beautiful girl," one of them said. "Wale seems to be spending a lot of time with her. Maybe we can have some fun too." Another one chimed in, saying, "Yes, we should all have her, even if it's just once. She's always going to Wale's house. Who knows what they do behind closed doors? Maybe he's already enjoying her." With those words, they decided to approach Copper Wale. They found him outside his house later that evening, and one of them said, "Wale, we see you with that girl Feyi all the time. She's beautiful and she's always coming to your place. Why don't you share her with us? We want to have a taste, even if it's just once." Copper Vale was shocked. His face turned red with anger as he looked at them. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice rising. "Feyi is just a student and she's going through a lot. She comes here to study, nothing more." But the other coppers didn't believe him. They laughed and teased him, saying, "Oh, come on, Wale. We know you're pretending. Why else would she come to your place so often? We just want a turn. Don't act like you're innocent." Copper Wale clenched his fist and took a deep breath. "I said no," he shouted, his voice filled with fury. "You will leave that girl alone. She's been through enough already, and I will not let you harm her." The other coppers sneered at him. They thought he was lying, that he was secretly enjoying Feyi's company and didn't want to share. But the truth was, Copper Wale wasn't like them. He truly cared for Feyi and saw her as a little sister who needed guidance and protection, especially after all she had been through. As the other coppers walked away, still laughing and mocking him, Copper Wale's heart grew heavy. He knew these men were dangerous, and he worried about what they might try to do. He wanted to protect Feyi, but he didn't know how long he could keep the evil plans of the other coppers at bay. From that moment on, Copper Wale kept an even closer watch on Feyi. But little did he know that trouble was already on its way. The other coppers weren't ready to give up on their dark plans. They had set their minds on Feyi, and they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. One quiet afternoon, Feyi went to Copper Wale's house for her usual lesson. She had her books with her, hoping to learn something new. When she knocked on the door, Wale wasn't there. Instead, his friends, the other male coppers, answered the door. They smiled at her, pretending to be kind, and said, "Wale has gone out to buy something. Why don't you come inside and wait for him?" Feyi trusted them. After all, they were his friends, and she believed they would treat her with the same kindness Wale always showed her. She stepped inside the house, thinking nothing was wrong. The moment she sat down, everything changed. The men, Kunle, Femi, and Dayo, came into the room, closing the door behind them. They surrounded her, their smiles fading into something dark and wicked. Before Feyi could understand what was happening, they grabbed her. She tried to scream, but her voice was trapped in her throat. They ganged up on her, forcing themselves on her one by one, taking turns doing the most terrible thing Feyi could have ever imagined and ignoring her cries for help. Feyi was left in terrible pain, her body aching and her heart broken. Tears streamed down her face as the pain grew. Feyi felt helpless, weak, and lost. She had trusted them, and now they had taken everything from her, leaving her broken and scared. When they were done, they left her there, alone and in pain. They laughed as they walked away, not caring about the damage they had caused. Feyi was shattered. She lay there for a long time, unable to move. The world felt cold and empty. She didn't know what to do or where to go. Corper Vale wasn't there to protect her because, unknown to her, he had been called away for an emergency and had to leave the village quickly. The other corpers, Kunle, Femi, and Dayo, thought they had gotten away with their terrible act. But what they didn't realize was that their actions would soon bring terrible consequences. Consequences they never imagined. After the terrible assault, Feyi's world crumbled even more. The pain in her heart was too much to bear. She cried every day, feeling more broken than ever before. Her body hurt, but what hurt more was the fear and shame that filled her. Feyi didn't know how to go on, and the sorrow she felt made her even quieter than before. But as Feyi suffered in silence, something even worse began to happen. The village started buzzing with gossip. Some girls who had always been jealous of Feyi, especially because of how close she was to Corper Vale, started spreading rumors. They whispered, "Feyi has been sleeping with all the male corpers. That's why she's always going to their house." The rumor spread like wildfire. Soon, everyone in the village was talking about Feyi. People pointed at her when she walked by, shaking their heads and whispering. They believed the lies, thinking she was no longer the good, smart girl they once admired. Feyi felt the shame like a heavy weight pressing down on her. She couldn't handle the way people looked at her, the whispers behind her back. Unable to bear the pain and humiliation any longer, Feyi made a decision. She packed her things, left her home, and ran away from the village. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay there. She couldn't face the people who believed such horrible things about her. Feyi thought she had escaped the pain, but little did she know. Her troubles were far from over. After the service was over, the male corpers, Kunle, Femi, and Dayo, left the village and returned to the city. They didn't think twice about what they had done to Feyi. In their minds, they had moved on, living their lives as if nothing had happened. They found jobs, made new friends, and seemed happy. But soon, strange and terrible things began to happen to each of them. Kunle was the first to face misfortune. He had just started a good job and was feeling proud of himself. But out of nowhere, he was fired. His boss gave no reason, just told him to leave. Kunle was shocked and confused. Why me? He thought, but he couldn't find any answers. Next was Femi. He had been feeling strong and healthy, but one morning he woke up terribly sick. His body was weak, and no matter how many doctors he saw, no one could figure out what was wrong with him. The illness grew worse every day, and Femi felt like he was slowly wasting away. Then came Dayo's turn. One day, without warning, he lost everything. His entire family, his parents, his siblings, died in a tragic accident. The pain of losing them all at once was unbearable. Dayo didn't know how to cope, and his life fell apart. As the three men faced their suffering, they couldn't understand why all these terrible things were happening. They hadn't done anything wrong, or so they thought. But the bad luck wouldn't stop. Their lives were filled with pain and loss, and they had no idea what to do. Finally, in desperation, they decided to visit a seer, an old man known for his wisdom and powers. When they arrived at his hut, they told him about their troubles and asked, "Why is this happening to us? What did we do to deserve such terrible misfortunes?" The seer listened quietly and then shook his head. He looked at the men with knowing eyes and said, "This is not ordinary bad luck. It is punishment for something you did, something very wrong. The spirits are angry with you." The men were confused. "What did we do?" they asked, still not understanding. The seer's voice was deep and calm as he said, "Think back. There is a girl, Feyi. You wronged her, and now the spirits of her parents are seeking justice." The men's faces turned pale as they realized what the seer was talking about. They had forgotten Feyi, but the spirits had not. The seer looked at the men, his eyes serious. "Your suffering is not by chance," he said slowly. "It is the result of your wickedness. The spirit of Feyi's parents is punishing you for what you did to her." At first, the men were confused. "Feyi?" they asked, scratching their heads. They couldn't remember who she was, but the seer continued, his voice calm yet powerful. "You hurt her, all of you. You took advantage of her when she was vulnerable, and now her parents' spirits have risen to seek revenge." Suddenly, like a heavy curtain being pulled back, the memory of that day came flooding back to them. Feyi, the quiet, sad girl who used to visit Corpe Vale's house, the one they had tricked and assaulted. The men's faces turned pale as they realized the terrible mistake they had made. They had forgotten about Feyi, but the spirits of her parents had not. "The spirits will not stop until justice is served," the seer said firmly. "You must seek out Feyi, and only she can forgive you. If she does not, your suffering will continue and it will only get worse." The men were silent, their hearts pounding in fear. They hadn't thought about the consequences of their actions back then, and now they were paying the price. They knew they had to find Feyi, but where could she be? The seer spoke again. "Go back to the village where it all began. You must find her and beg for her forgiveness, or you will never find peace." The men were terrified. They knew they had no choice but to return to the village and search for Feyi, the girl they had wronged so deeply. But what they didn't know was whether Feyi would even be willing to forgive them. Panicked and filled with dread, the men wasted no time after the seer's revelation. They knew their suffering would only get worse if they didn't find Feyi. With fear and guilt weighing heavily on their hearts, they rushed back to the village where they had once served, the place where everything had gone wrong. As they arrived in the village, they were greeted by familiar sights: dusty roads, old huts, and the sound of children playing. But something was different. The energy around them felt heavy, as if the very ground remembered what they had done. Their hearts pounded with anxiety, knowing they had to face the consequences of their past actions. Without wasting any time, the men began asking around, stopping villagers and inquiring about Feyi. "Do you remember Feyi, the girl who used to visit Corpe Vale?" they asked, their voices shaky. The villagers paused, their expressions changing as the name Feyi brought back memories. "Ah, Feyi," one of the old men muttered. "That poor girl. Everyone remembers her." But when the men pressed further, they got the same answer over and over. "She left the village. After what happened, she just disappeared. No one has seen her since." The villagers recalled the gossip that had spread like wildfire years ago, how some had believed Feyi was involved with the Corpers, the rumor that she had been with all of them, the shame it brought to her name. but no one knew exactly where she had gone. Feyi had fled, and it seemed as though she had vanished into thin air. The more the men asked, the more desperate they became. The village seemed to hold no answers. Feyi had left, and with her went any hope of clearing their name and ending the curse they were under. Just as they were losing hope, an old woman who lived near the Corpers' house spoke up. She had been watching from her doorway as the men went from person to person, their faces growing more desperate by the minute. "You won't find her here," the old woman said quietly as they approached her. Feyi left after the scandal. The whole village was buzzing with talk about her and the Corpers. She couldn't handle it. One day, she packed her things and ran away. No one has seen or heard from her since. The men's faces fell. The guilt in their hearts became even heavier. They had hoped that coming back to the village would be the first step in setting things right. But it seemed that Feyi was gone, lost to them forever. "Do you know where she might have gone?" Dio asked, his voice trembling with regret. The old woman shook her head slowly. She didn't tell anyone. She just vanished, like a shadow in the night. Heartbroken, the men had no choice but to leave the village empty-handed. They returned to the seer, their faces pale and their spirits broken. When they explained what had happened, the seer shook his head, his expression stern. "You cannot give up," the seer told them. "The spirits will not rest until Feyi forgives you. If she is not in the village, you must look elsewhere." The men were confused. Where could they possibly search now? Feyi could be anywhere, and they didn't know where to begin. But the seer continued, giving them a hint that reignited a small spark of hope. "Think back," the seer said slowly. "Was there anyone close to Feyi? A friend, a protector, someone who might know where she went?" The men exchanged worried glances, their minds racing. Who could possibly know Feyi's whereabouts? And then, like a bolt of lightning, it struck them. "Corper Wahle," Kunle said, his voice filled with sudden realization. He was always close to her. He cared about her more than anyone else. If anyone knows where she is, it would be him. The men remembered how Corper Wahle had been different from the rest of them. While they had let their desires cloud their judgment, Wahle had genuinely cared for Feyi, helping her study and encouraging her to reach her dreams. He had always been protective of her, and there had even been talk among the Corpers that Wahle had feelings for Feyi. Without wasting another moment, the men set out to find Corper Wahle, praying that he would hold the key to finding Feyi. Their journey took them to the city where Wahle had settled after his service. They asked around, following every lead they could until they finally found Wale's home. When they arrived at his doorstep, their hearts were pounding. They knocked on the door, and after a few moments, Corper Wahle appeared. His face was older now, but the men immediately recognized him. Wahle looked surprised to see them, but before he could say a word, the men fell to their knees. "Please, Wahle, you must help us," Kunle begged, his voice breaking with emotion. "We did something terrible, something unforgivable. We need to find Feyi and beg for her forgiveness, or our lives are doomed." Wale's face darkened as he listened to their words. He had always suspected something had happened to Feyi, but hearing it from them filled him with anger and sadness. "You hurt her," Wahle said quietly, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You hurt Feyi when she trusted you." The men bowed their heads in shame, tears welling up in their eyes. "We know, Wahle," Femi said, his voice shaky. "We have been suffering for it ever since. Please, if you know where she is, help us." We'll do anything to make it right." For a moment, Wale stood in silence, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and pity. Then he sighed deeply. "Come inside. There's something you need to see." As the men followed Wale into his home, they couldn't believe what they saw next. Sitting quietly in a corner, heavily pregnant and with a calm but distant look in her eyes, was Feyi. The men couldn't find their voices. Guilt and shame wrapped around them like chains. Corporal Wale's face darkened with anger as he realized what had happened. He had suspected something was wrong when Feyi disappeared, but he never imagined that his own friends had been the ones to hurt her. His voice was low but filled with fury as he turned to them. You did this to her?" The men, already broken by the suffering they had faced, dropped to their knees in front of Wale and Feyi. Tears streamed down their faces as they begged for mercy. "We didn't know it would come to this," Wale Kunle sobbed. "We've been cursed ever since. Everything has gone wrong, and the seer told us only Feyi can forgive us. Please, we need her to end this torment." Feyi remained silent, her eyes fixed on the floor. The men's pleas filled the room, but she said nothing. Finally, she looked up, her voice cold and sharp. "You think you deserve forgiveness after what you did to me? You ruined my life, took away my peace, and now you come here asking for mercy?" The room fell into a heavy silence. The men's hearts sank deeper. They knew they didn't deserve her forgiveness, but they had no other choice. They had been cursed with misfortune, and only Feyi could release them from the suffering they now faced every day. Wale, though furious, softened as he saw the desperation on their faces. He understood that the curse would only grow worse if Feyi didn't forgive them. "Feyi," he said gently, "I know they hurt you. What they did was unforgivable. But carrying the weight of their wrongs forever will only bring you more pain. Letting go will give you peace." Feyi's hands tightened around her belly as she thought about Wahle's words. She had carried her pain for so long, pain that had made her run, hide, and change her life forever. The thought of forgiving them felt impossible. But Wahle was right. Holding on to the hurt had weighed her down, and she had a child to think about now. After what seemed like forever, Feyi finally spoke, her voice steady but firm. "I will forgive you," she said, her eyes locking onto the men. "But there is a price." The men looked up, hope flickering in their tear-filled eyes. "Anything," Femi whispered. "We will accept anything." Feyi's expression was cold as she continued. "I forgive you, but none of you will ever be able to have children. That is the price for your forgiveness. You will never know what it feels like to be a parent, to care for a child. Just like you took away my peace and my future." The men nodded, tears falling freely as they accepted her condition. They had no other choice. "Thank you," Kunle said, his voice cracking. "Thank you for sparing us." Wale stood beside Feyi, his heart heavy with the weight of what had happened, but relieved that Feyi had chosen to move forward. The men left his home, their hearts filled with regret and sorrow. Though they had been forgiven, the consequences of their actions would stay with them forever. In the months that followed, Feyi gave birth to a beautiful baby with Wahle by her side, supporting her every step of the way. With his help, Feyi returned to school, determined to fulfill her dream of becoming a banker. She worked hard, and despite everything she had been through, Feyi succeeded. She became the banker she had always dreamed of being, and finally, after years of pain and struggle, she found happiness. Wahle remained by her side, and together they built a life filled with love, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. Though the past had scarred her, Feyi rose above it, proving to herself and the world that she was stronger than the pain she had endured. And as for the men, they lived their lives with the knowledge that their actions had cost them dearly. They would never know the joy of having children, and that was a burden they would carry forever, a reminder of the price of their wickedness. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, comment what you learned from the tale, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting tales just like this one. Thank you.